14 months of undercover work ended the moment red and blue lights began spinning across a quiet gravel driveway. Special Agent Gideon Mercer stepped down from the lead SUV and felt his chest tighten before his boots even touched the ground. His father, Hollis Mercer, stood beside the garage with his wrists locked in silver cuffs, jaw tight, eyes calm. A woman in a sharp red blazer stood only inches away, a thick folder pressed to her chest, pointing toward the old man, as if his guilt had already been decided. She was ordering the deputy beside her to tighten the restraints further. Behind Gideon, 6 black federal SUVs, 2 evidence transport vans, and 20 armed agents idled in formation. The very convoy meant to bring him home safely after more than a year spent chasing dirty money through construction firms and homeowners associations across 3 counties. He never once imagined danger would be waiting for him on his own family's lawn. Hand-painted signs had been staked into the grass, warning of property seizure and pending enforcement, planted on land his grandfather had owned decades before this neighborhood ever existed. The woman in red, Marjorie Vance, president of the local homeowners association, barely acknowledged him, assuming he was a lawyer or a curious bystander. She warned him to stay back from what she called an active enforcement scene, never once glancing at the raw marks already forming on Hollis's wrists. Gideon asked, in a voice that never rose, exactly what authority allowed her to place a 68-year-old man in handcuffs on his own property. Her answer came without hesitation, but the paper trembling in her hand told an entirely different story, one built on forgery instead of law. 3 days earlier, Gideon had still been living as someone else entirely, a name on a lease that wasn't his, a familiar face at construction sites where nobody asked the right questions. For 14 months, he had carried that borrowed identity, tracing a laundering network that pushed dirty money through real estate firms, contractors, and homeowners associations scattered across 3 counties. The work had quietly taken everything ordinary from him. His father's 70th birthday had passed, while Gideon sat parked outside a warehouse, watching men who wouldn't hesitate to end a case the hard way. The anniversary of his mother's passing came and went, marked only by a text message he never found the courage to send. Even the simple Sunday phone calls that once anchored him through the hardest stretches of the job had slowly disappeared. Hollis Mercer had raised his son alone after that loss, on 3 quiet acres that predated the manicured lawns of Westbridge Estates by nearly 2 decades, log walls, a stone chimney, and a dock where Gideon used to fish as a boy. It was the only place that had ever felt permanent. Coming home was supposed to be simple. 1 turn off the highway, a short walk up a familiar driveway, an evening where nobody needed anything from him at all. Instead, the convoy rolled toward a neighborhood that felt staged and somehow wrong. A steel gate had gone up at the entrance sometime in the past year, security cameras swiveling to track every vehicle that passed beneath them. A private guard rushed forward waving his arms, only to freeze and step back the moment he noticed the federal plates gleaming in the afternoon light. Past that gate, his father's house waited quietly at the end of the block, and for the first time in 14 months, Gideon felt something colder than fear settle into his chest. The convoy rolled to a stop the instant Gideon spotted the handwritten signs staked across the lawn and the deputy pinning his father's arms behind his back. Marjorie stood beside them, folder in hand, instructing the officer to tighten the cuffs without ever glancing at the bruising already forming on Hollis's skin. Hollis never resisted. He simply repeated, calmly and steadily, that his house had stood on this land 2 decades before the association even existed, and that no paper she carried could rewrite that history. Gideon stepped forward in a plain dark jacket, his badge still hidden, and Marjorie mistook him for a lawyer come to watch the spectacle unfold. He asked what authority let her handcuff a 68-year-old man on his own land, and she answered instantly, citing threats against her staff and a broken property seal. He reached out and took the paper from her hand, and within seconds, understood exactly what he was holding. The case number matched no format the county had ever used. The seal had clearly been photocopied. The signature belonged to a judge who had retired 3 years earlier, details that any legitimate filing would never be missing. Marjorie let out a short, dismissive laugh, certain the old man had already lost everything. Gideon opened his jacket and let his federal badge catch the afternoon light, then gave a single calm order for the cuffs to come off immediately. Marjorie barely flinched, glancing past him toward the line of idling federal vehicles and dismissing the entire scene as an internal association matter beyond his reach. It was the deputy who cracked first, admitting under quiet pressure that the sheriff himself had personally instructed him to assist that morning. Gideon motioned for his partner to activate every body camera on scene and begin verifying the paperwork through the federal system, aware that whatever Marjorie had spent years building here was only minutes away from unraveling completely. Within the hour, the truth unraveled faster than anyone expected. There was no lawsuit, no lien, no legitimate seizure order anywhere in county records, only 11 years of manufactured fines over a garage door, a fence 2 inches too tall, and an antenna left on a rooftop. A supplemental ownership document bearing what looked like Hollis's signature, tested as ink, barely months old, despite being dated over a decade earlier, proof of forgery no one could argue away. When the sheriff arrived with 8 patrol cars and an oddly friendly smile, agents discovered the community gate had locked itself shut the moment their convoy entered, sealing every exit behind them. Blocks away, smoke began pouring from the windows of the HOA's management office, files deliberately soaked in accelerant, a shredder still running at full speed. Inside a hidden safe, agents found a hand-drawn map with Hollis's house circled in red ink, and beneath it, a single unsettling note demanding the final phase be completed before Friday. Cornered by mounting evidence, a bribed sheriff's department, a hidden multi-million-dollar land deal, and testimony from a witness who had risked everything to come forward, Marjorie made one final desperate move, breaking back into the Mercer home to destroy the original deed before it could be used against her. She confessed everything aloud, while holding Hollis at gunpoint near an old family safe, never realizing Gideon's badge was quietly recording every word. When she fired in a moment of panic, the shot missed completely, and Gideon's partner moved in before she could attempt it again. Rather than fastening the cuffs himself, Gideon handed them to his partner, refusing to let justice feel like personal revenge. Months later, father and son stood together on that same lawn and planted a small wooden sign at its edge, a quiet, permanent reminder that this land had never belonged to anyone but them. If you were in Hollis's position, would you have stayed silent this long or fought back from the very first fine? Tell us in the comments below.